Welcome to our game today. Today we're looking at a game from 1992 between Susan Polgar and former world champion Anatoly Karpov. And in this game, Susan Polgar begins with d4. We get knight f6, c4, e6 by Karpov, knight f3, b6, g3, a6 by Karpov, b3 by Polgar, and then bishop b4 check. And if you've watched our previous video between Magnus Carlsen and Anatoly Karpov from 2008, so 16 years later, Karpov was still playing this exact same Queen's Indian defense finsh Nxh2 variation. And if you didn't see the last video, well, you might think, well, going knight, moving your knight on b1 to d2 would be a good move. But in fact, this is a famous trap where you can now play, if you're black, you play bishop to c3, and after rook to b1, it allows your bishop to go to b7. Here you can do some different moves. You can go queen to c2, that allows you to win the pawn, and you can take this bishop back because, of course, this rook would be hanging. Instead of c2, you might just decide to go to bishop to g2, but that allows you very simply to jump in here with bishop to e4, and the best move is to castle and to give up the rook, to give up the exchange, and after knight takes back and bishop to b4. According to today's advanced computers, white is slightly better, but of course you've given up the exchange, so you need to know what you're doing in this position. So instead, after bishop to b4, we get bishop to b2, bishop to d2 by Susan Polgar. And then Karpov drops back bishop to e7, we get bishop to g2, c6, castles by white, d5 by Karpov, knight to e5 by Susan Polgar. We get knight to d7 by Karpov, which Polgar decides to trade off, and then we get knight to d7. Then we get bishop to c3, we get castles by Karpov, and then we get knight to d2 with the idea of pushing the pawn to e4 and with the double protection gaining control over that square. So we get f5 by Karpov followed by rook to c1. Then after bishop to a3 attacking Polgar's rook, we get rook back to b1. Then we get d6, b4, queen c8 by Karpov, and queen b3 by Susan Polgar. So her idea is, well, we're going to make an attack on the queen side. So it's kind of interesting. Polgar was such a strong player, and it's really interesting to see this game against such an illustrious opponent as Anatoly Karpov. So Karpov responds here, though, by making an inaccuracy. He plays b5. A better move would have been to move your knight here to f6, and the reason for that can be seen by Polgar's next move, which seems like the obvious move to play in this position of c5, but now you've got a very cramped position on the queen side for Anatoly Karpov. Your bishop on a6 is doing absolutely nothing, and there's a lot of maneuvering to be done by Karpov to try and get any kind of attack going. And this game is pretty much looking very nice for Susan Polgar, and so she plays e3. We get queen to e8, we get f4, and we get h6 by Karpov, knight to f3, and then afterwards we get king to h7. So trying to take advantage of the pawns, blocking off any diagonal, getting the king, it would seem very safe. So white really is for choice in this game. So Susan Polgar here decides to go king to f2. Now king to f2 is an inaccuracy according to chess.com, but the idea behind it is Susan Polgar, she's not waiting around. She says, I'm not taking a draw in this game. Things are very much clogged up. You can very simply just move the pieces around here, and Karpov would probably be happy to take a draw. But Polgar's like, no, I'm not happy to take a draw. I'm coming out attacking. So she moves the king with the idea of getting these pawns rolling and trying to get an attack on the king here. And as you can see on this side of the board, the black has only got the rook for protection and a couple of pawns. So Polgar definitely is in a position to launch an attack. So we get knight to f6 by Karpov, knight to e5 by Polgar, which is an inaccuracy because it allows this bishop trade-off. Bishop wasn't really doing anything. And then after d takes e5, we get knight to g4 check. Karpov plays e2, and here, Polgar plays e2, and here Karpov, well, he was faced with a choice. What is he going to do in this game? But he decides to go knight to h2. He says, there's a free pawn. I'm happy to take the free pawn, and I'm going to take it, and then when I'm attacked, I'm just going to jump back. But of course, now you've opened up a direct file line of attack against your king, and there's a rook on it. So Susan Polgar is like, says, I'm going to take advantage of this. So she goes queen, she moves bishop to f3, then we get queen to g6. After rook to h4, she plays Karpov plays king to g8, and then we get a really nice tricky move by Susan Polgar here. I really love this move because she plays queen to c2. So why is that such a tricky move? Can you see the reason why? Well, if for instance you take a move, let's say any move, just move your bishop back here, after the rook move, if you decide to take with the pawn, well, you lose your queen. You might win the bishop back, but here you're completely and utterly winning. This pawn is weak. You've got attacks all over the place. So a very nasty position to fall into. So a really nice move there. I really like that move. So instead here Karpov decides, well, I'm going to just jump back here to e8. But this is a mistake because it allows this great move of rook to h1, lining up this attack up along on this direction. So we get bishop to c8, we get bishop takes g4, then we get rook takes g4, king h8, but this is really a monster attack that is facing Karpov. Of course, he has to move the king here because otherwise, again, if we just do a move, for instance, you're dropping a pawn here. So we get king to h8, then rook to g6, we get queen to f7, we get g4, we get g8, and now we get the rook taking the pawn on the h6. And this was a nice move as well, trying to move this pawn up along the g file. We get a5, we get rook to g5, and here we see that Karpov has got it's a checkmate here. In fact, the only way to stop this is by giving up your queen here, and life is a pretty sorry position when that's the only way to escape. So after rook to g5, you know, Karpov could have just resigned, but instead he played a takes b4, allowing this beautiful checkmate by Susan Polgar of queen to h7. So really lovely attacking game by Susan Polgar, showing her strength against the very elite of the chess world.